So this is Campus Commons. Campus Commons is a mixed-use development proposal. It combines residential retail space into a unique living and shopping experience. The residents of Campus Commons and consumers who use the retail space will enjoy the close proximity to all 5 campuses in Davie. Our vision, it's really based on the town's comprehensive plan to provide a walkable, pedestrian-friendly mixed-use environment. Within the REC, Davie has created a framework to encourage mixed-use development, and we intend on basically following through with that plan. A lot of it, obviously, to help keep it within an as of right development, so we don't require any type of special variances or permits. There's going to be 111 dwelling units, 91 bedroom, 21 2-bedroom, and 35,000 square feet of street level retail. So the location of the 2 lots, it's right here on the corner of Nova and College Avenue. The 2 lots combined are a little over 2 acres. The intersection is heavily trafficked. There's at least 40,000 vehicles a day according to the Department of Transportation. Easily within walking distance to all 5 campuses right here. I mean, I took the measurements. They're give or take half a mile to every single one of them. And it's also less than a mile from 595. The zoning of the 2, the zoning of the 2 properties is REC RTW. It allows for a variety of uses, but essentially, like I said, the REC really encourages mixed-use development. They kind of want to create an environment where a vehicle is not really needed and it's pedestrian-friendly. The important part in the zoning is that they're located on what Davie calls transit-oriented streets. Those streets, they have special requirements, and those requirements supersede any of the other zoning. The 4 requirements that really pertain to our development is the fact that it requires retail on the ground floor. It must be at least 2 stories. It has to be architecturally interesting, and needs a minimum of 2 use types. Now, the retail on the ground floor is encouraged. It's not necessarily required, but obviously the implication is that it would be a mixed use, basically the same structure there. So this is just a recap of the 4 requirements of transit-oriented streets, and I wanted to show it next to a picture of the proposed development. Here we have retail on the ground floor. It's 4 stories. I think it looks pretty architecturally interesting. I think what the specifics was that there's some articulation on the street level and a little bit of height transition. Now, the 4 stories wouldn't necessarily require height transition, and in the back of the report you could see the specifics for transit-oriented streets. But again, it adds to the architecture. And again, it's 2 use types. We have the residential on the top 3 and the retail on the bottom 4. So the REC is 4 different districts within Davie. Our proposed development would be right at the edge here of the educational district. And I personally spent some time looking for any vacant developable lots left in the education district, and there really isn't much left. I mean, outside of the campuses, there's not, I mean, the campuses are the majority of the district as it is. This lot is really one of the last available developable vacant lots. So this is the proposed site layout. The important aspect is, considering it's mixed use and we have the retail on the ground floor, you really want it to be built to the line. You want it right against the sidewalk. That's the whole idea. The 10 to 12 foot sidewalk that we proposed would run along the entire outside, and that kind of was the influence really to create the L shape, just to give it as much sidewalk frontage as possible. The lot line's a little funky here, but I think you can work with it, and maybe you can expand it out a little bit. The sidewalk, I'm sure the city would appreciate even keeping the sidewalk as wide as possible. And you can see here there's an access street that provides ingress and egress on both Nova Drive and College Avenue. And this would be basically just a 2-lane access street. There's also a little access street in between the building and the parking garage for the retail space, for deliveries and service vehicles. So the retail market in Davie is very strong. It's not strong everywhere, but Davie seems to have a strong retail market. They're basically, Davie's at full employment. I mean, 2.8 doesn't get much better than 2.8%. The retail vacancy rate is 2.4%. And you'll see in my pro forma, I actually used a 5% vacancy rate as a whole for both the retail and the residential. So a lot of the numbers you're going to see are conservative numbers. I really wanted to leave as much cushioning as possible. The average rent in Davie is $25.62 per square foot, but the newer construction that's coming out is more along the lines of 30 and up. So the Class A retail that's new construction is closer to 30 or more. And the net absorption is 225,000 square feet, and that just shows really, really strong demand in the Davie retail market. The multifamily market in Davie is also strong. I mean, that's strong really across the entire country, but in Davie we see, based on the Marcus and Millichap report, that the effective rents are actually, on average, $494 less than the monthly mortgage payments. The vacancy rate here is also 4.2%, which is also less than the 5% I had calculated in. We have an effective rent of $1,677. So you'll see that the 1-bedrooms we have would be, I believe I have it at $1,320, and the 2-bedrooms at $1,750. So those are competitive rental rates. I didn't go crazy. I saw plenty that were much higher in the area, but again, I wanted to stay slightly conservative. And again, a positive net absorption of 2,400 units. Really high demand. So this is kind of just a summary of your immediate demographics near the site. This is within 1 mile. Now I could have gone out a little farther, but I kind of wanted to stay closer just to show the importance of the student population and the young population in the area. Your main market is going to be between 20 and 35. And that's all right here. So you can see that the total of really between 20 and 35, it makes up, I know it's hard for you guys to see that, but it makes up over 30% of the population within a mile. And you can see the trends in the national trends. Obviously, we're all well aware that people under 35 tend to rent and don't really buy homes right now. So with having thousands of students, plenty of young professionals, both of those are more likely to rent. We've got a pretty solid market nearby. So when analyzing this, I took 2 options. I did a student housing only version and a conventional standard apartment version. And the reason I did that is because of the Davie parking requirements. So the parking structure is an expensive component. It's really expensive to build, and I think it's important to really, just mess with the numbers and try to get the cost of construction down because of that. Davie's requirements for student housing are below 1 spot per bed. So essentially, if we were to keep it strictly student housing, you could pull an entire level of the parking garage off, and that would save you a little over $1 million in construction costs. The issue, and I'll address the issues in a little bit, but really the problem with just student housing is Davie requires that you can only market to students, you can only rent to students. So you have a much more limited market that way. These models are in the report, and again, I don't expect you to see every number here, but I circled the important things. So this is the student housing, and you can see the construction of the student housing here and the required equity versus the construction here and the required equity for standard apartments. So you would essentially, again, you'd need a little over $1 million more equity to pull off the standard apartments. Also, the going-in cap rate for the student housing is 6.48 versus the 4.67 of the conventional multifamily. Here's the IRR of both projects. This is the student housing. You have about 11.8% IRR after 5 years with a reversion, and a 9% for just conventional multifamily. So before I go on, I just want to mention, I mean, it all, the numbers look good, but it's a little misleading because, again, you're limited with student housing. So your vacancy rate might not be 5%, and there's a few other issues that come along with that, and I'll go into that next. The three biggest issues that I saw, and this basically led me to the conclusion that I would recommend moving a little bit away from the strict student housing, building the bigger parking garage, the higher investment, to have the option to do conventional multifamily. One of the biggest things is the broader market. You don't have to just worry about marketing to students and leasing to students, so your lease up would potentially be a lot quicker and less difficult. You're going to have less turnover because students, they go to school, and when they're done, they leave. I mean, max they might be there. I know a lot of the freshmen have to stay on campus for the first year, so they might be there 3 years, 2 years, some maybe even 1 year. That creates a little bit of an issue, as it gives you a little bit of a higher vacancy rate, and the expenses are there for the make-readies and the repairs. And the last thing is the higher resale value. I think a lot of investors, a lot of buyers would shy away from a strictly student housing development due to the risk. You don't know how the market's going to be 5, 10 years from now. And it also opens up a few more options. I mean, having the extra parking is a benefit, especially with the 35,000 square feet of retail. So just a quick deal structure. This would be based on a pari passu distribution with the developer bringing the land as equity. In the report, I have it there where the bigger parcel, they're asking 2.5 right now. We thought 2.3 would be a reasonable price after negotiations. And then the neighboring parcel, which is a little smaller, could probably be picked up for around 800,000. So that gets you to 3 million. And then the required equity for the remaining equity needed for the standard apartments would be closer to around 8 million. And the total project return would be 9%. There it is, campus commons.
So one of the things, I think you did a great job, by the way. One of the things that did you think at all about trying to, instead of partnering with the current owner of the property, of potentially talking with one or more of the universities about them purchasing the property, using maybe like their nonprofit status to be able to avoid having to pay property taxes, and then work out maybe some sort of a long-term kind of ground lease with them to build the property?
So you're saying to have the university actually purchase both lots? I didn't really consider it. I wasn't. I mean, to me, that kind of gives up a lot of control for the project. I mean, I guess it makes sense having the nonprofit side of it, but no, I didn't.
It's kind of been a huge business across the country of private universities, public universities, that own the land and they don't have to necessarily pay property taxes on the land, and then work out these 15, 20, 30-year sort of kind of ground leases with the developer of the property, and that way the developer can come in, build, collect all the rents, do all the management, and then maybe at the end of the 20, 30 years, the reversion is just simply you give the property back to the university.
Yeah.
Makes your sort of initial investment maybe a little bit less.
So the carrying with the property taxes the whole way would be a lot less than us.
Yeah.
Because I know that was a hefty part of the expenses in the pro forma. I mean, the other issue with that though, would that mean that it would be strictly student housing again?
Yes.
Okay. So, I mean,
it was just, and you brought up the comparison of saying that the student housing return might be 11% versus the 9% that you would get on the broader, I guess, market. But given the proximity of this project to the 5 different campuses, to me it would really make sense. I mean, it's just like how many, I don't know, other folks would be really interested in this. I mean, I'm not saying they wouldn't be, but I mean, given its immediate proximity to those campuses, you'd think you'd have a pretty strong demand for student housing, and as you said, that would alleviate the need for the extra parking and the parking garage. So, I mean, I understand why you did what you did, and I think you did a great job. But just, I think that still 11% return versus 9% return, that's significant.
Now, a lot of, like I said, a lot of the numbers, especially in the pro formas, if you look through, they're really conservative.
Yeah.
That was all done because, again, as a first-time developer, you don't know everything. So it was. I do think that the returns would be higher, regardless. Yeah, student housing is always going to be, just because of the lower cost of construction. So and you're right. I mean, even with the standard apartments, I think being so close to the universities, most of your tenants are going to be students anyway. So yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, so overall, I think your written report was great, very detailed, it had great flow to it, had all the information needed, so great job on that.
Thank you.
I do agree with Dr. Forty. As I was reading through the report, I was led to believe the project was going to be a student housing project. The financials showed it, all the indicators showed student housing, and at the end, your conclusion was market apartments. I was like, where did that come from? So I do agree with Forty. I think this makes more sense than student housing, especially given the financial returns.
Yeah.
I did see a couple of things I wanted to ask you about. The land basis, you put at 2.2 million, put out statement for the main parcel.
Right.
So how did you come to that figure?
So they're asking 2.5 right now, and I just assume, with negotiations, I mean, it's been on the market for a fairly long time. I would assume that a 2.2 offer would be something they'd consider.
They likely would. My comment on that is you probably could even decrease that further. The reason why I say it is your project still isn't as appealing as it should be as far as from a financial perspective. Your yields are a little low, and your IRR out the back end is very low. So from an investor coming put in his capital, they're looking for anywhere from 18 to 20%.
Sure. You're
nowhere near that yet.
Yeah.
So that from that standpoint, it's going to be really hard to raise the capital.
Yeah. So and that was a big issue with the whole thing to begin with. The IRR that I came up with, it's low, and that was definitely a realized thing. I just know, based on what the comprehensive plan and the zoning is here, there's really not a lot of options. I mean, you're kind of stuck doing a mixed-use development.
So you obviously were conservative. So did you build the model to sort of show, if you weren't so conservative, what it potentially could blow up to?
Yeah, sure.
And do you have any idea or recollection of what maybe those returns might have been?
It was closer to 12, 13
okay.
for the standard apartments. I know the students could have pulled out a little farther. It was really all just, it was dependent on a lot of assumptions, like the vacancy rate, for example. I mean, I didn't realize the demand in Davie for retail space was so strong. But at the same time, it's not like it's on some strip that everybody's walking down. So, I stayed as conservative as I could and still kept the numbers positive.
But the interesting thing is you listed traffic counts with about 40 to 40,000 per day at that intersection. The American Dream Mall, which is in discussion right now, is eyeballing 70,000 visits per day. So you are here at roughly 2/3-ish, on what they project for a multi-billion-dollar project.
Wow.
So it's a lot of traffic. There's no question about it.
I guess that's where one of my, a couple concerns. One was traffic flow and that stuff. Again, that intersection is a disaster, now. And now you're adding both retail space and, housing of some sort to it. Any thoughts on, I know Davie, and again, I live in Davie, so, keep Davie country. That's what the politicians will thrive on.
Right.
This is far from country.
Not in that corner.
Well, but again, you can't, because that corner is a mess.
Yeah.
But then to add that on there, have you thought about that, or how that could even get approved with the increased traffic?
Here, I'll show you. Just the thought, the only thought I had, the only way I could see avoiding congestion and issues on the road was in the layout here. Hold on.
So the comprehensive plan for the town of Davie is he's completely in line, complying with the comprehensive plan, even with the building height and setbacks and all that. So traffic at that corner, the way he proposes the project, is not a problem at all from his project.
So this is the site plan, and one of the things I wanted to leave, I know they want wide sidewalks, as
Right.
close to the street as possible.
Absolutely.
That's I think what all the cities want. But there is a big, so this black line is property line, so there is a big easement on this property, and I think it leaves, when I was doing the report, it leaves a lot of expansion room. One of the things I tried to do is make sure that there was the ability to keep a flow of traffic from the ingress and egress. So you could pull in this way. This would be a 2-lane street. It's actually measured out 15 feet, so it's possible to have 2 lanes in here, and that would give a little bit of a buffer getting into the garage. I mean, there probably would still be some.
Yeah, I mean, I have the visions of the Chick-fil-A, and they now have had to change the parking lot and close for 3 months to redo the traffic flow from there. So that was one. Can you talk to me a little bit about the retail space, because you spent a lot of time on the housing, and obviously that's a piece of it. But I mean, you've got a third of your building retail, and talk to me about that, especially with the mixed use. I mean, have you thought about, is there restrictions on the type of zoning? Have you looked at what's around in that area in general? I'll say because they're looking for walkable,
Right.
Somebody living there and being able to walk. What do you see for that retail space?
So the REC RTW zoning designation, which that's one of the best parts about this lot. I mean, it's really open-ended, but I kind of envisioned it more of like maybe a gym or restaurants. I don't think you'd have a lot of boutique shopping. There's not a lot of traffic there right now, so it would kind of be destination retail, something that they would have to, people would know it's there and they'd drive there for that reason.
I mean, I always get nervous with restaurants and housing.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever experienced that. And I'm a city girl, so New York City and Philadelphia is my frame of reference. I will tell you, I've thankfully not lived above it, but have family members who did, and the rats and the bugs and everything else that goes on in the restaurant. It doesn't matter how clean your restaurant is. I grew up in that business. That is an issue and something you want to think about for that. The other one I'm going to throw out there, have you thought about making people pay for parking as a resident?
I did, actually. I thought about that, and that, it was something I was going to try to build into it. The only reason I really didn't is at least in the beginning, it was kind of like, there's not a lot of traffic there at the moment as far as retail space. Now, yes, there's a lot of drive-by traffic. It's a lot of commuters going to school, but the walkable traffic and people driving by looking for retail to go to, it's not there. So I didn't want to push anybody away from using
I
it.
guess I'm talking about resident overnight.
Oh,
You want
okay.
to pay to park, I mean, that's what a lot of spaces will do is, you're going to do overnight, well, it'll cost you $200 a month or $300 a month or whatever it may be.
Oh, that's that's
In
a
way, again, you might lose a couple bucks on the rent,
good, sure.
but if you want to have a car here, that's how you bump it up. I mean, that's how cities work. And then the other issue with your parking is, I'm just looking from a retail standpoint, again, if you're going to, how you're going to structure this thing, because I would assume the residents are obviously somewhat of a built-in market, but my parking is all in the back of the restaurant, back of your retail space.
Right.
I would, play the woman card. I would have a problem going there,
Yeah.
especially at night.
Safety issue.
It's a safety issue.
Sure.
Yeah, I think that's just prime for issues.
Yeah.
And so that, again, when I was looking at this, I'm like, retail space, so I just thinking through how that mix is gonna work. It's one thing, maybe have, I call it the bodega, again, the city girl coming up, but kind of a little spot that might do sandwiches and some stuff, but you might wanna cut down on the retail. Just a thought, again, you guys, people with far better knowledge than me, I'm a numbers person, so I know just enough real estate to be dangerous. But, that's just something you might wanna think about.
Makes sense.
For
Yeah.
there.
The comment with the parking, the orientation of parking is interesting, that you say that, because parking usually falls, like parking structures falls underneath the idea of architecture of fear. There's not enough light, if the limits parking spots are not next to the exit. Nan Allen wrote a really great book on that. So you also could say, well, medical officers are allowed in that zoning code as well. So instead of retail and restaurants, you're focusing more on something that is definitely more on the day population traffic,
Yes. Yeah.
because people are students or the general apartments are not being used usually until 6 o'clock in the evening, so medical office, dentist or something, which solves also that kind of parking issue in and out. What I thought your report is falling short is on addressing that there used to be a gas station on the main parcel, and the current other parcel, the west side, which is, you can see that entrance and exit area, where so you say Nova Drive, so there's actually two parcels combined.
Yeah.
Has actually, I would consider this as wetlands because it has a depression in it, standing water, and a ton of wood. And I skimmed through it again. Do you address potential environmental issues with 2 sentences?
Mm-hmm.
I think for a site that has easements, that has wellheads, that went through environmental cleanup, which was provided in the package,
Right.
some information. I think you also went to the city, town of Davie, for additional information. I think that offsets the uniqueness that you actually present 2 versions, 2 scenarios in student versus regular apartments, and offsets that positive effect, because this is a site that needs to have a certain address on the environmental issue.
Sure. Now the only thing I definitely didn't talk about it much. I wasn't really, honestly, I didn't get very well versed on it. I couldn't find a lot on it. The only thing I did do was in the construction costs, I have a fair amount of money aside just because I wasn't sure. I know that if there's tanks, they might have to be removed and the soil treated and all that stuff. Okay, so yeah.
They have been removed, they have removed.
So yeah, that's all expensive. So I left about 700,000.
Property is technically cleared of any gases, etc. How did you, with that kind of impervious area, that's the other environmental part that wasn't addressed in my point of view, not well enough addressed, is drainage.
Right. Yeah.
How you solve that?
Yeah, that would definitely be an issue with the city. That's something that would have to come up. I mean, I know some of the things I was reading in the zoning, they were very lenient towards mixed-use proposals, but that would be for sure an issue.
So that would be an additional cost because you have to train within the property, and right now you didn't really address that.
Okay.
So
I want to talk about your proposal real quick on the actual write-up. As I was reading it, like I said, you're very detailed and a great flow to it, but you did miss a key fact. I didn't understand what type of use it was. You did say residential, but you didn't say what type, all the way to the financial page. Now, there was a lot of, you implied a lot of it, so I figured it was a rental product, but I really didn't understand it until you got to the financials. So in the executive summary area where you would have said residential units, it would have been great if you would have said rental.
Right. Okay. It would be condos or yeah.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
Exactly. On the market analysis side, you did a good job on highlighting the demographics and highlighting key points. You did use information that was very general. For example, CoStar average rents and such in the market. One thing I did not see you do is drill down on the market itself, though, as far as looking at rental comps, seeing what kind of rental rates they're achieving. Same thing with the retail side, what kind of rates they're achieving, because those quotes you see or those metrics are very general, very broad. So you want to drill down to what the new construction is getting, what the actual vacancies are for new construction. And as I mentioned, your financials weren't appealing enough for capital investment. I think you had a lot of room in your rents to increase your rents. If you would have go deeper into the actual rental market, you could have increased your rent significantly. And I think your IRR would have been a lot higher on that side.
I did see the new construction. So I looked at a lot of the new construction. I saw that the rental rates were definitely higher. Again, I was very nervous of going too high. I figured initially getting it leased up quick would be a benefit. I think, and that was part of the thing, I figured as a long-term investor, a long horizon, this would be a much better idea for someone that has the time, that wants to wait. But a lot of the numbers I used initially was to just get everybody in there quick, just to get a cash flowing. But I agree, I should have.
So since we are in the last minute of the allocated time, can you go back to that slide with your IRR, where you actually show the 2 scenarios for future presentations? The visuals have been great. The talk over the visuals has been great. Once in a while, in terms of presentation style, you did stuck here and there you looked at the slide and you saw the keyword and then you have been back in the flow. Yeah. A visualization trick, if you go, because you build big numbers on all the slides so far, you have big numbers, you tell the story, and then you end up with small stuff like this. This
Yeah.
one or the other one, doesn't matter.
Right.
And we always have the report in front of us. We all have seen the numbers, and we are all kind of knowing, well, yeah, he's going to show us thousands of little numbers, and the 3 or 4 that really depend on what we think about this whole project are the little numbers in the red.
Right.
For the next time you do this, go with, even with the fancy animations, and put that number in big bold letters red next to it.
Okay.
The 11.8% and the 7 or something like this. I'm getting old, I need glasses, or it's a bad image. Why not? You have a ton of space to the left and to the right. In terms of graphic design, why not just to have that zoom out and say, listen, this is the number in comparison, and then the same thing to the bottom, this is the number. Because you deal with the whole story right now. Remember, this is about telling a story, making a pitch. Right now, you're doing this, contrasting 2 scenarios. This slide does not give a contrast. This slide is some garble where I say you failed any visualization class.
Right. Okay.
Yeah?
So
if you
put the bigger numbers obviously on the.
I would just take that, copy and paste, and zoom in, or just type it in and say big red net numbers, and so you see.
I would, don't put a boatload of numbers. What's important? Show me what's important.
Yeah.
In a good visual that I'm gonna remember. Those ones you did before, because I had concerns about the vacancies and all that. You showed me the number, you told me, boom, you can handle my concern and move on. This just increased my concern by seeing all those numbers. You're hiding something. You're showing me way too many numbers that I now have to dig. And I'm a CPA and I'm saying that. So, you know.
So those 2 slides, the one before and this one, disrupts the visual flow.
Okay.
This looks great in a report, and basically, if you would revamp those, then you're completely good. All right. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for your hard work.
Thank you guys. Thank you for taking the time to come out and make an extra visit for me. Definitely helpful.
Yeah, so.
Are you staying for the?
Yeah, I'll stay.
Can you please?
Sure.
And you need to switch the panel on the left. You need to switch to PC here.
And clicker, did you take a clicker? Oh, yes. Here.
Is it yours or is?
This one is, but it's all right. It plugs right in. Stop with the laser.
Oh, whenever you're ready, Chris.
Is there anything else to it?
Maybe the system's not recognizing it.
Let me try
Give it a moment, slow installing it. Okay, right now.
There we go. All right. So good morning. My name is Chris Spalding. I've had the idea of doing projects with shipping containers for a while, and this happens to be a great site to do a mixed-use container development for student housing. And pretty much what we're going to talk about today is going to be, what the regulations are, what the site plan is going to look like, what the market is, the financials, and then pretty much the conclusion of why we should do this project. The vision is here to provide affordable student housing you know, I did a lot of comps of the area as far as what's available, and it seems like rents are really high. And we're trying to provide an option for students to be independent, not having need for the roommates, which is something that a lot of people, you know, who are in school don't particularly want. And it's also going to be interesting to see the fact that we are actually using shipping containers as recycled material for the projects. You know, something that is going to be very attractive for the city. It's going to be very attractive for the project. It's going to promote, you know, wellness for the environment, and it's going to be very much a coolness factor for the type of clientele that we want, the type of students that we want in this project. So this is kind of a little bit of what it's going to look like, or what our vision is as far as, you know, how it's going to be built, why people think that sometimes shipping containers don't look as nice. They imagine a boat out there in the water with a whole bunch of like just dirty shipping containers and things that probably are not as appealing. And this is a project that, you know, if you look at it, you know, it can be designed in a lot of different ways. I'll pretty much show you that, you know, each box right here is a different shipping container. So there's a lot of space that can be used in a small space. So a lot of units for a small parcel, because in this parcel we only have, I think it's 2.12 acres once we combine both units. So this is a little picture of where the parcel is. You know, there's two parcels. One of them is 6650 Nova Drive, right here, which is this parcel right here. And then we have the adjacent parcel, which is composed of a lot of trees and a lot of rainforest / density of natural activity. The zoning here is going to be on the REC. This is basically a spot where you are allowed to have a lot of flexibility, but at the same time the city is very specific as to how that flexibility is used. So one of the things that we need to make sure we're going to do on this site is that anything that is commercial is addressed on the corner of facing the streets. So anything that's going to be commercial, the city wants you to have a close connection to the streets, so that you can have sidewalks that people can walk around, and so that it's appealing to drive by pedestrians. The current zoning and land use is designated currently as a vacant commercial property. The jurisdiction again is the REC, it's the Regional Activity Center. Like I said before, it's basically the city allowing you to use the land for a mixed-use development. It's kind of like what they really want. And in this case, what we're going to do is, or what we're proposing, is mixed-use commercial on the first floor, which by the city regulations needs to be of a certain height. So in this case, the first 2 levels of containers are going to be used for commercial as a one-story space. So it's going to be opened up to the height of 2 containers because of the restrictions on how commercial is to be used. And then up on top of that, we're going to have some student housing. In the back, you'll see the site plan shortly, but we'll have a couple of buildings that are strictly student housing. This shows you that there's a lot of, you know, universities and things that are related to students along close to where the site is, which is right there. So again, this is you were talking about student housing before and just regular housing. So we did want to do student housing because we know that the environment of students that we have, where the possibility of attracting students is very high. So like I said before, for this building, it's going to be residential and commercial. Residential, I mean by student housing. And a couple of the same stuff, you know, relative to the street, the city wants to see that commercial frontage on the street or anything that's commercial. This is the same picture you saw before. This is a little bit of a taken out image, so you can see what's around it a little bit better. These are pictures of what I think are actually really important for the site plan that I'm going to show you later. And these are already on the site. So this site already has 2 entrances in place that were previously used. You know, the parcel used to be a gas station, and so it had an entrance and exit on both Nova Drive and College. Avenue. And the good thing about this is that we're actually trying to incorporate this into the site plan to use it as traffic flow. So that, because, for example, on Nova Drive, if you see this picture, there's a separate entrance, and you follow this, it's actually one of those lanes that you can actually go into before you actually make a right turn. So that decreases the traffic, that allows people to get into a different lane, let the overflow of the traffic keep going straight, and it's going to help us with having the city not give us any issues or less issues with traffic flow. There are a couple other pictures of what the site looks like now. The big site, which is the 6650 Nova Drive, will have a lot of empty, just empty land. And then the other side, this is kind of the beginning of the other side and the other entrance. You see there's still a lot of shrubbery and vegetation that will need to be eventually removed. So, and here's the actual site plan. So I drew this, and I kind of color coordinated so that we can kind of address each of the buildings. But we're going to start with, on the street side, you're going to have the blue buildings, which are going to be commercial, like I mentioned before. The first 2 stories, which is going to end up being 1 story, is actually going to be commercial. And we're going to try to have, I know you mentioned something about the restaurants, but it's, we're imagining some Chipotle style restaurants, so there's now more Greek foods, that are in the same kind of environment or same type of restaurant style where you walk in, you eat quickly and you leave. We're going to have amenities on building 5, which is the orange building. And what we're thinking student housing, so we don't need to have a pool, really, they can go to a pool on campus. But what we do want is going to be an area people can relax, ping pong tables, pool tables, things like that. And as additionally, this is going to be split up so that you can have your own area of just study rooms. Because a lot of people don't want to have to walk back to campus, but they don't want to be by themselves in their room when they're studying. And it's sometimes helpful to have these meetings of groups together. So we thought that would be a great idea for having an amenity in this case. And then the pink buildings, or in this case, it seems like they're purple. These buildings are going to be strictly student housing. And what we try to do is we take advantage of the fact that we don't need as much parking. But we do leave, a frontage of the space as a 1-story parking, just flat parking with the option of eventually it's needed or eventually something needs to change, so we can add a structure here. So that's why there's plenty of space left over that is not being, it is being used, but it's not being used to the fullest of its potential. And it also saves us on not having to spend money on a parking garage right out of the get-go. Any questions on the site plan? The traffic flow is, for the most part, it's kind of one way. You try to have the traffic flow. So, because you were talking about entrances and things, so we have 2 entrances. It's very easy to get in and out of the property. You have two ways to get in and out. And within the site plan, you want to have the traffic flow in one way, so you don't have any issues with how everything needs to flow. Here's a couple ideas of the layouts of what units could look like in the inside. And this is a unit that's 2 shipping containers together. This is 1 shipping container. And this is actually a half a shipping container, which is really kind of like a 2-story and then a loft area that can also be considered as a 1 unit. So most of the units here, actually all of the units here are going to be studio 1-bedroom. And I say studio 1-bedroom because technically if someone wanted to close out the bedroom, they could. But for our purposes and for the city purposes, we're really saying studios just because of the minimum requirements for what the size of studios are versus what 1-bedrooms are. Because they want very big sizes for 1-bedrooms versus studios can be a lot smaller, and shipping containers, you only have a certain amount of square footage. So they're all studios for that technicality. Build materials. So I'm actually really fascinated about shipping containers, and I try to get myself involved with projects of this nature. And one of the cool things and factors of shipping containers that a lot of people kind of don't see right off the bat is that when they're put in shipping charters or in shipping boats, they stack them up to 8 stories high, and each one of these are filled with tons and tons of weight. So for us, it's a very solid structure. The structure that is just bolted down. It's hurricane resistant, tornado resistant. It has a lot of stability, and it's just doing it properly and designing it nicely so that people, so people don't see it as an eyesore in some cases, because a lot of the image people have, you know, they see them on ships and they're not well taken care of, they're not painted properly, and they have a lot of potentials. And I'm a really big believer in, you know, all these shipping containers that we have in the States that are just sitting there not being used for anything because it's cheaper to not send them back, and it's cheaper to get them into the country with a new order. You know, it's just a waste of material that I think we should be implementing more of. Market analysis. So this is located in the town of Davie. There's several campuses nearby. You know, I showed the other picture before, but we have FAU, Broward College, College Academy at BBC, Nova, UF has a campus as well. And you know, there's a lot of student activity in this area, so we're really comfortable with the student housing concept. As far as what businesses are around the area, you know, from the location, it's very easy to get to like small restaurants, Publix, strip malls that are in the area. There's also a Trader Joe's. And we also have a lot of other student housing competition. Some of it apartments, some of it strictly student housing. And I actually did go ahead and look at specifically which ones are available for other students to kind of take as options. And our pricing, which you'll see in our financials, is we start at $1261 for the biggest studio unit, and then our smallest studio unit is going to be $946. So that's very, very competitive. The only other place that has something in the 1200s is going to be Palm Trace, which is just west, actually just east of where this site is, once you hit the end of Nova Drive. But as you can see, you know, these prices, $1,300, $1,300, $1,600, $1,800. I mean, if you get the option of a one-bed studio or one bedroom for $1,800 versus, you know, $1,261 or $950, $946, I mean, that's a big change. So we don't foresee any issues with attracting students, especially students that want to live by themselves. They want to have their privacy, and I think this would be a great option for them. So they're kind of like financial analysis as far as, you know, what we're expected to get from each of the units. We have a little bit of commercial space. Like I said, the commercial space, the way I calculated is, you know, we only have those 2 buildings, and each of the buildings is going to be 2 stories, but you're really just counting it as a one floor because of the height restrictions. And we're going to have 116 units, which is thanks to the addition of the other parcel, we were able to get those other 2 buildings in there. And you know, our total income is going to be 1.7 million, more or less, which is, you know, pretty good as far as, you know, what the investment is going to be like. Financial analysis, like, I also calculated a 5% vacancy rate, and it seems to be like the standard in the area and standard in a lot of models, so it made sense for this. We calculated a couple of the expenses, maintenance, service, repairs, reserves, insurance, property taxes, sewer utilities, management fees, all this, and we realized that we would be bringing in more or less around 1.3 million, 1.35 million, and that gives us a lot of workability with how much we can spend on this project. Construction costs. This is kind of, I'm currently working at D.R. Horton, so I kind of used some of their numbers, but at the same time, kind of, you know, it's not the same product, so you had to do some research on companies that have been doing stuff with shipping containers. But basically, the land actually came up with $3 million as well, and with the same kind of idea of, you know, they're asking 2.5 right now, they're probably negotiable, and then you have to acquire the parcel next door as well, which in this moment is actually within a lot of, it's under some sort of foreclosure or financial distress, so even more chances of you actually getting it for maybe land development and parking should kind of go together because, you know, the finishing of the land development should be the first layer of parking. But because there's unknowns on the property, things that you're going to need to mitigate, you know, possible issues with the city, you want to protect trees that are on the site, removals, possible mitigation of wetlands, unknowns. You know, this used to be a gas station. I do know because of the owner and the broker on the deal, he did mention that the site be mitigated as far as the tanks, they be removed, and they have been kind of free of gases for a while now, and it's been recovered after the tanks were removed. So that information we had, our build cost was going to be $8.5 million for the whole project. Remember that shipping containers are somewhat inexpensive to buy, so each shipping container should cost us between $1,500 to $2,000 because we're getting them from bulk and we're doing recycling of the ones that are sitting there doing nothing. So that's more or less what they're going to be costing us depending on condition and what needs to go into them after the race. And I also had a contingency of $350,000. You know, I think at this point it should be enough, but there's always that option where, you know, it might not be. So trying to be somewhat conservative. And our total project cost was going to be $12,680,000. As far as how we're going to fund the project, I actually normally like to do a lot of borrowing money or borrowing capital. So my intention was to find investors that are willing to put the equity and do a purpose where everybody gets a split. To invest in the project with the goal of selling the project. So this is very important because we're not planning on building the project and holding it for 10 years, 12 years, 15 years, whatnot. So we're calculating that in 2 years we're going to have the project built and filled with tenants. The only delay I can foresee here is just the permits as far as the city. But but we won't have to invest the whole amount of money until we actually start, you know, pretty much clearing the land and development. Because I'm thinking that with the owners of the land, you know, because I work at the airport and I know how the land process works, when you purchase properties, purchase vacant land, and you have to go through a whole entitlements process, permits, approvals, and once you do that, then you actually put that as a contingency on your contract, where, you know, nothing's going to happen. I mean, you're going to spend some money to find out what the city wants and, you know, permits and maybe some plating or whatnot. But once that's done, you know, you put that into your contract. You maybe spend, you know, $100,000 out of pocket to get that stuff going, and after that happens, you know, you close on the property, knowing what you can and will be able to build. You can pretty much start immediately. But you have about a year and a half of all these entitlements process where you're not really spending the majority of your finances. It's just a small part of, you know, the 12 million. And with the calculations that we did, we imagined that we're going to be able to do a 10.6 cap rate for the rental income and the profitability of the property. And what we found out is that that's great because we are seeing that the market is buying properties, a multifamily or student housing property, anywhere between
20 minutes up.
Anywhere between the 5% and 6% cap rates. So I did the calculations as far as doing this in 2 years. You'll see that if we invest the $12.6 million and then we calculate what a 6% cap rate would be, we'd be able to sell it for $22.5 million, more or less. And that really is a great investment because we are getting a ROI of 77.41% over the 2 years. But since it is 2 years, then we're really getting annualized at 30.
Okay, time is up.
Oh, time is up.
Thank you very much.
So that's 5%.
Time is up.
So first thing on the question of the financials, I saw you had a cap rate of over 10%. I mean, that's amazing, but is it realistic? That's the real question. When I see a cap rate that high already in my mind, I think that's not a realistic number. I know you were trying to save money on your storage containers, but I don't think you did a good job presenting how you're going to save the money. you know, reference any savings in cost or how much a container is actually worth it costs you. I know you said each container costs a certain amount, but what is your, you know, price per square foot on construction for a storage versus a conventional, you know, block system? So I didn't understand that piece. So whether or not the savings kind of offset, you know, everything else and drove up the returns, it may be a question, but I wasn't clear and confident enough to say, hey, the 10% you're showing me is realistic. Kind of raise a red flag for me.
Okay. Thanks.
So one of the first things that just sort of popped out at me, what about the tree removal that you've got on the site? I mean, are you gonna run into any issues or problems there with the city in terms of, you've got that whole parcel that's obviously completely covered with trees, or are there any restrictions there? Because I mean, obviously, in most locations, there's some sort of a tree ordinance that, you know, if you remove a tree, you've got to replace it with another tree, or, so any ideas about that? This is what you may encounter there?
So a lot of the trees that are on site are more shrubbery than actual like big, you know, old trees. However, the city does want that if you remove a tree, that you replace it, or that you are fined with a large sum. So it's determined on how it works on your how it works in your performa. So if you allocate, like I put enough money on doing parking and land development to, you know, pretty much acknowledge that there's going to be trees that we're going to have to, you know, pay $30,000 for just because we can't do anything unless they're removed.
Right.
Some of them, if you see the site plan, there are some green areas on the site plan. So there might be some stuff that can be saved or reused or replanted, but realistically, there's going to be either fines for removing them or trying to mitigate with them. Can we put them somewhere else? Or can we pay for, you know, somewhere else to plant some of the trees? But yeah, that's part of the cost that we will probably incur.
On your OpEx, I noticed you put 20%. Where did you get on your OpEx for the operating or the profit and loss statement? You had a 20%. Where did you get that figure? The reason why I ask is it seems very light for the type of proposal you're providing there.
The expenses?
Yes.
I think it's just a percentage that I felt comfortable with, just because, I mean, for you it might be light, but I'm not expert yet. But I thought 20% is pretty substantial.
I guess the question is, did you use any relative benchmarks or comparative figures to get to that number, or was it shot in the dark?
I think it was more of a free calculation versus, you know, kind of like a more of a guesstimate in this case.
Because I think part of Tim's point is that specifically could be what's driving your higher cap rate. That if you are underestimating your operating expenses, then that's going to drive up your net operating income, which is obviously going to influence your cap rate positively. So, you know, that could be part of the reason why you're seeing the higher than normal or higher than expected cap rate.
Just while you're on that slide, where'd you get your numbers? I'm just looking at some of them, they look low. I mean, I'm looking at water and sewer just for, you know, the number of units you're looking at. Water down here is insanely expensive, so I guess I was just wondering where you got your numbers from.
Well, it's as far as water goes, it's just considering the type of property. You know, it's going to be one person per unit, so you're going to have multiple people per unit. You're using vast majority, like vast
I guess
amounts of water.
where did you get your numbers from? General, just again, I just picked out water because it was one of the ones that hit me, but I couldn't do it with any insurance, whatever. What did you base it upon? Did you use something to get those numbers?
Yeah, so actually I own a couple of rental properties,
Okay.
and you know, I kind of calculated more or less if my rental property cost me so much in water, you know, try to calculate that versus, you know, I actually, maybe this is a little bit less conservative and more like go-getter.
Yeah.
But I try to see, you know, if one person is going to be using one unit, it's not the same as having, you know, a family of three, you know, two-bedroom property. So I kind of, that's why I lowered it a little bit, and I calculated based on what those numbers would be towards, you know, the amount of units that we would have.
I mean, why would you have not have allocated the water and sewer and utilities directly to the units as opposed to you fronting those costs. In other words, you're listing them up there as if you as the property owner are going to be paying for the water, sewer, and utilities.
Correct.
Why would you not go ahead and just try to directly bill the individual tenants and have them responsible for their own water, sewer, and utilities per unit?
Because as a tenant, I would say I'm gonna pay this amount of rent, I don't wanna worry about anything else. The only thing that I know that for a fact every tenant will worry about is they have to pay the electric, you know? But water in a lot of cases is included, and I also saw that in a lot of the other properties, it's, you know, you pay your rent and it's all together. So it's included, so we don't wanna be the one that, oh, now I have to set up my water, now I have to set up
But
my
you were also
electric.
marketing this as a student property, correct?
Correct. So it's-
Most student properties, you don't pay electric, you don't pay utilities, you don't pay water, it's actually all inclusive.
Well, the only thing that we're not accounting for here is the electric.
Right.
So this means all these costs are not for the tenants or for the students. They're gonna be incurred by the owner. So I agree with what you said, except for the electric. That's the only.
Can you just help me, and I've seen container, I'll say on the retail space side and in the Northeast, much different in South Florida. Are there other properties here that are using containers down here? And I'll say specifically, I kept reading this thinking, first good hurricane and also 100-degree heat. This is a metal container. I know how bad a cinder block house is. Can I just speak to one, if there's other properties around, and number two is what research or how you're gonna mitigate that concern of the environmental of South Florida?
Okay, so I'll take one at a time.
Yeah.
Right?
Go for it.
But as far as, let's start with the container itself, right?
Yeah.
So there are special paints that you can get, or you can apply on these containers to mitigate, you know, the heat. There's also insulation that needs to be applied to them. So here in Florida, there is another property that I've seen that has used containers. There's actually two. One's actually in Wynwood. It's like this. It's this guy who, it's called Windbox. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but they have developed a container house like a model more than anything. And then I know this gentleman who in Broward County has developed a property, and the only thing he needed to do, because it was a house, not because it was a building, it was a house, was do the installation. And they gave him the option of doing it on the inside of the container or on the outside. He chose to do it on the outside, probably because, you know, he's hiding the metal, and metal heats faster. So, and I think those three.
I guess that just hurricane and hurricane rated,
Yeah, so for hurricanes, these are technically rated better than your regular home or frame home, and because they're attached on the four corners. So once they're attached, they're literally not going anywhere. And the amount of stories that we're doing is no more than 4 stories. So we're not really concerned because we've seen them stacked on boats, you know, over 8 stories high, and they hold on in rough waters and seas, and I don't think there's a lot rougher way than that.
I mean, you know, again, the weighting down helps you in a hurricane. You know, if I've got 100,000 pounds of pressure in the neck more than my chair and sofa and bed. So
Yeah, but
that's why
it's not more about the weighting down as far as how heavy they are, it's about the system that holds them down.
Right. Oh, no, I mean, yeah,
Okay.
the strapping and stuff like that, and again, I just make.
Steve, final comments?
Sorry.
Can you go to the slide that you showed the rental rates for the different properties? So I like that you presented that. However, I think you could have used that slide a little better. You could have used your, you know, what you're underwriting for your rents and have like little comparative figures and, you know, price per square foot and just see where it all shakes out. So this gives me an idea of what they're charging, but I don't know the square footages. I don't know where your kind of pricing shakes in. I know you verbally said that, I think you said 1261, if not mistaken, but it would have been nice to see it comparatively kind of shown on the.
And to complement that also would be, you know, to include the student housing cost. Because there are dorms here on this campus and elsewhere that it would be, you know, and I think important to show what those rates are as well. Because once again, those are going to include the utilities within them, and that's going to be a different sort of costing than it would be for just a traditional market-based apartment.
All right, I have final comments. Perfect, because that was one of the main criticisms here. market prices needs dollar per square footage. If you could say one plantation charged $1,600, well, it's a premium location. It's probably one of the more younger stock in the inventory, and you need to tell, okay, is one plantation 1,100 or 1,500 square foot, and then leverage that out a little bit in terms of the square footage, as Steve said. If you do student housing, you have to remember that student housing here on campus, if it's organized through the dorms, is a 9 or 10 month contract now, is it?
Right.
They're not rented out in summer, so that is something you have to consider as well. A general comment. This is a darn sexy idea. Innovative, goes into the micro apartments, mini houses or micro houses, containers, everyone, as you said, well, if you think about Port of Miami, high stacks with cranes or a big boat, why not to show a picture like this and say, hey, listen, this is the ugly part of the containers. These two pictures are the sexy part. Let me tell the story how housing, the new way of housing for student housing is this. Yeah? So you kind of put yourself into the rabbit hole with not delivering that sales pitch, because that sexiness factor of the design, the universal component of how to structure this, the top left picture is absolutely fascinating. If you ever thought about containers, this is mind-blowing. And yes, I'm going to use the word, you failed to execute that sexiness through your presentation. Because then you can ride the wave, and all the criticism about financials and skepticism about cap rates will be blown away. And say, okay, fine, we need to adjust the financial model, but the product, the idea of using containers as a new housing unit type is sold. Yeah. So again, the investors are critical right now about the idea and the numbers. I think that is a major flaw in your presentation today. And again, I am judging here the presentation style and the images and the delivery methods, not the content. Images could be larger. You present like the site plan, close-ups where the site is, and different formats of site. Full slide. Take a full slide instead of two small images. Full slides. And now the other one. You compare this. Go was in the front where you show basically like aerial photography and where the site located further. This one, it's completely okay to present this as two slides, because right now on the right one I don't really see anything here. You know? So think about the larger 30,000 foot way of the sales pitch.
So don't worry about the amount of slides.
The what?
Don't worry about the amount of slides. Just make sure that.
Oh, you are limited by time, but not by slides. You can do 5 slides in 10 minutes or 20 slides in 10 minutes. It's
That's
about the
fair.
delivery method. Yeah? So, yeah, some fine tuning for the next project. Thank you very much. I thank you everyone for coming, for putting time in to read and judge. I appreciate you guys, and I'm looking forward to work with you in the future again.
Thank you very much, guys.
I like the way that you actually put this.
It was a couple minutes late, yeah.
You guys anything more to?
No, I'm.
Anyway,
Please.
Pre-game.
When I was here, man, I was through.
Get them away.
Yeah, trust me, man, we all went through it. So,
Good to see you again.
Thank you.
Communicate,
I
man.
love it, yeah, definitely. I'll email you.
I gave you criticism on the first.
It's getting better.
Never came back and said, hey, okay,
I can't believe whenever I have 4 kids, it's still not ready for it.
communicate.
I didn't think by 32 I'd have boys.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, man.
I feel like it'd be worse before girls.
Oh, you 4 girls?
No, I have 2, that's
Oh,
funny.
okay.
Anyway.
I do say that sometimes, that's my saving grace.
Your saving grace, yeah.